Well, hello, hello. It is great to see you again, and welcome back to Optimizing Your Financial World. And boy, is it great to have you guys back here as we're moving in deeper to season two. Mark Wade, president of Echelon Family Office, going to be joining me in just a moment. I am Ryan Ruff, your host and moderator. But boy, is it good to be back with you again today. We have a great conversation teed up for you guys today surrounding the idea of this wall, this proverbial wall around your wealth. We're diving in today to the importance of asset protection. So let me frame it up for you guys before we bring Mark on and get right into the conversation. Look, being wealthy, being successful is so great in so many ways. We know this, but it can put a proverbial target on your back for some frivolous lawsuits down the line. So, asset protection planning can really do a great job of helping to better safeguard your wealth, to build that proverbial wall around your wealth. So, with that in mind today, that is what we're going to be exploring, some of those foundational asset protection strategies that you might want to be considering for yourself. So, with that, let's go ahead and bring Mark on and get right into it. Mark, good to see you today. How are we doing?
Hello, Ryan. How are you?
I'm well. Can't complain, Mark. Always a good time when we get to hang out and dive into another topic together. We got a good one
Awesome.
today, don't we? Yeah, we got a good
Oh,
one.
yeah. Asset protection is one of my favorite topics to talk about.
Absolutely. So let's start high level, like we typically do, and then we'll get into the weeds. Mark, this idea of the concept of asset protection planning. What is it? Who needs it?
Sure, Ryan. If you're highly successful or tremendously successful, that success you really can make you a target for lawsuits, and oftentimes the frivolous and unfounded ones that can come out of nowhere and wreak tremendous havoc on your financial health and family stability. So, you know, that means you've got to take special care. You've got to take steps to protect the assets you've worked so hard to build from being unjustly taken. And asset protection planning, as we define it, is the pre-litigation planning. It's the before somebody sues you planning, that is designed to deter the lawsuit from even happening, if possible. Okay. And if not, to encourage settlements that are favorable, to you, the client. And Ryan, the logic behind asset protection planning, really is to build a wall around your wealth. The kind of wall that's as difficult as legally possible, for litigators, i.e., attorneys and creditors and others, to get through or to get over. Instead of trying to, to fight it out in court for months or years and with the risk of losing, the litigant or the opposing attorney sees that the only reasonable option, from a legal standpoint might be to settle for pennies on a dollar, or ideally, to just leave empty-handed and not institute a lawsuit at all.
So yeah, Mark, I want to go back and I want to underline and really highlight something that you just said because I think it's worth really bottom lining it here for our audience, and that is that asset protection is really about sending that message that an unfounded lawsuit is likely to fail in the first place. Am I correct in saying that?
Ryan, that's absolutely correct. Sometimes people assume that asset protection is about hiding money from the world, but that's not it at all. It's quite the opposite. What you want is you want anyone who might come after your assets, again, frivolously or unjustly, to clearly see that what you've done to build a wall around your wealth is going to prevent them from doing that. That shows them that, it's going to be a difficult path for them to take to get at your wealth, which hopefully will cause them to either settle, negotiate, or throw their hands up in the air and walk away, which is the desired result.
Sure thing, sure thing. I figured we should bottom line that before we get even deeper into the weeds here, Mark. But Mark, in your conversations, with your clients or maybe prospects, anybody out there that's successful in the world, do you find that most successful people recognize a true need for asset protection and planning in the first place, and they're taking those proper steps to build that wall around their wealth?
Yes, Ryan, absolutely. It's kind of a good news, bad news situation. The good news is that, these unjust threats, from people, from individuals, or from other entities, they are on most successful people's radars, screen. They are concerned about it. For example, most successful business owners in our experience, they say that they're really concerned about becoming the object of a lawsuit or being victimized, for example, in terrible divorce proceedings. But Ryan, the bad news is that we see far fewer successful business owners and others actually have a formal asset protection plan in place. Given the risks that are, in our our culture today, these litigious risks, you know, it's concerning that the awareness for the need of an asset protection strategy, a cohesive asset protection strategy to protect your individual and corporate assets, your business assets, okay, uh, are that it hasn't led to the implementation of these strategies in enough cases. Too many people are naked with regard to proper protection. They haven't built that wall.
Interesting, interesting. So, I mean, they recognize the need. It's just that the steps aren't really being taken. So, more action really needs to be taken, it sounds like, on most instances from those highly successful people out there. But, Mark, most of the reasoning probably behind people not taking those steps is that they don't know where to begin. So, how would you say that successful people should start this process of getting an asset protection plan in place?
Well, great question. So if you're among the many successful people out there who lack a proper asset protection plan, consider a few basic and key actions, right up front, and you should also consider these actions if you've got an existing plan in place and are curious whether or not it's as strong as it needs to be. And of those things, the first step that I would suggest is to get protected before a claim, is made against you. You can do a lot to protect your wealth before the liability arises. And thanks to a concept known as fraudulent conveyance, very little can be done after the fact. So any of the asset protection strategies really have to happen prior to a claim being made because there's not much you can do afterwards but try and limit the damage. So, like, as with insurance, the time to have an asset protection plan in place is well before you need it,
Mhm.
or even if you think you might need it in the future, it's best to have it in place already.
Sure, sure. So let's get into the weeds here a little bit. What does a good asset protection plan entail, and what do you find that it should really be addressing?
Well, Ryan, it does all begin, with the human element. You need to know what the client's goals and ambitions and concerns are, because the specifics are going to depend on the personal situation and needs, of course. Uh, but certainly you want to make sure you're covering the basics from the very start. Evaluate your liability insurance and other related policies and maximize them as best you can. Maybe the fastest, easiest, and cheapest way, you know, to mitigate risks is through a large umbrella policy to safeguard your assets. Another simple but powerful strategy that we see used often can be to place your assets in someone else's name, such as your spouse's. If you're sued, those spouse controlled assets are often untouchable. Of course, be sure you have a great deal of trust in your spouse and your marriage before transferring ownership assets to him or her. In a divorce, your spouse could potentially walk away with those assets, or you could be forced to fight for them, at least as hard as you might fight a creditor who was trying to get them from you.
Roger that. So a few good foundational strategies there, Mark. But maybe once those are in place, what would you say are some maybe next level strategies that pop up to you?
Okay, so once you have considered and effectively instituted the simple and mechanical things that are available to you to begin to mitigate risk, uh, you know, you could think of, maybe off the top of my head, you can think about, appropriate utilization of risk through the transfer of property, uh, casualty insurance, homeowners, auto rental, personal excess liability, umbrella, etc. Make sure your health, disability, life, long-term care, director's liability, and professional liability coverages are all up to snuff. Make sure they're going to do what you're going to need them to do in the future. You can use the state law exemptions effectively. For example, the homestead exemption, the exemption for cash value life insurance policy, retirement plans, annuities. You could also consider various forms of ownership that will put assets beyond the reach of a creditor or make those assets less desirable for creditors. You can examine restructuring your current business. You could discuss gifting some assets when there are no current creditor issues in order to lessen the likelihood of raising a fraudulent transfer later after the fact. You could also look into advanced protection strategies that are commonly used by people, with extreme wealth, such as equity stripping or closely held insurance companies. These strategies, they may be more than you need, but it's good to know that they exist and whether they might be a good fit for you. Uh, and if there's a lot of risk attached to what you are doing as a business owner, the more your industry, company, or competitors have gotten hit with lawsuits, then advanced asset protection strategies uh, may actually become more applicable in those cases. So, structuring any expected gifts and or inheritances to protect them from the claims of creditors is also very big.
All right, I love that, Mark. And so, Mark, I mean, the bottom line here is it's got to be done beforehand. It's got to be done before litigation, before any sort of claim comes up. But Mark, how would you say, going back to that conversation that we've had so many times on this show of making sure you work with the right professional on these things, how would you say that you should tap into the right expertise needed to evaluate your needs and and then perhaps implement some of those strategies that you just mentioned in terms of these asset protection solutions?
So that is a great question. It's really valuable to work with a team, and so that these people have been vetted already. But let me start by giving you an analogy. If you, for unfortunately, would need heart surgery immediately, it's a dire need. Would you want the guy that does it once a week or the guy that does two or three a day and has been doing it for 20 years or more? I mean, you want the experienced person where that's their area of expertise. So, you want to be sure that your attorney or other professional are really qualified and experienced, to help you protect your assets. And this is an area that, is very specialized and complex. And some financial professionals who are highly skilled, in other areas aren't always in a position to provide guidance when it comes to the implementation of many asset protection solutions. So, assess the asset protection expertise among your professionals. You want to make sure you're going to work with or get referred to qualified trust and estates attorneys, qualified patent attorneys, qualified people who are experts in those specific areas. So the expertise they possess themselves or the resources that they have access, to their in their professional network of and of other experts is top shelf, proven, and time tested.
I love that. Such a good point there, Mark. I mean, and I love the medical example there. I mean, anybody can recognize the need to work with the surgeon that's doing it 2 to 3 times a day, as opposed to, like you said, the guy that's doing it once a week. But
And been doing it for a while.
right, exactly. You want the seasoned veteran when it comes to asset protection. That's for sure. So,
I have
Mark,
I have I have nothing against people who just come out of medical school. I just don't want them operating on me today.
fair point. Fair point. Uh, well, Mark, as we're bringing our conversation to a head here, we've covered some asset protection strategies, the foundational ones, some deeper level ones. We've talked about the steps that people can be taking. Um, but let's talk about maybe some of the mistakes here that you might see. What are some of those mistakes in terms of asset protection that people should be on the lookout for that and make sure they want to avoid?
Well, look, there's no doubt about it. Some asset protection strategies require a deep familiarity with and a very strong understanding of how they work in order to set them up and execute them effectively, because if you poorly structure these things, asset protection strategies, are not going to have any teeth, right? They're not going to be effective when you need them most, and the assets won't be nearly as safe as other people assume. So one mistake that you could see is overlooking the need to protect the business owners on both the professional side and the personal side. And let's take real estate developers for example. They commonly place each of their development projects in a separate limited liability company. Each one of their projects is its own separate entity. That way, if one project occurs a lawsuit, the others are protected and can't be included in that lawsuit, or at least not much chance of being attached through that lawsuit. And the problem there when you use the multiple LLC strategy, which can be very effective if used properly, you know, is that those LLCs are many times set up so the developers own them directly. Well, how silly is that? What's the difference if I own the property or the LLC the property sits in? They're going to try and get it anyway. So, if you get hit with a personal lawsuit, they're, if, let's say they're involved in a DUI accident or their child smashes a car into a school bus, all those assets in the LLCs could be tied up and grabbed in a lawsuit. But, you know, most likely they're going to be tied up in a lawsuit for a long time. So
Mhm.
ultimately, you can't necessarily stop someone from suing you, but you can take steps to make you a less attractive person to sue. It'll make it harder for litigants to collect money from you unjustly and maybe even prevent those litigants from coming after you at all if you have done the proper work beforehand, before the incident occurs.
And right there, that is the ticket. Well said, Mark. And Mark, for anybody out there in our audience that's, this conversation might be resonating with them today. And let's say they're interested in talking to you and your team about asset protection, maybe their current plan, or maybe, hey, maybe they're recognizing the need that they need to get one in place right now. What would you say is the best way they could reach out to you and your team just to open up a conversation on that front?
Hey, Ryan, it's not uncommon nowadays that people want to, examine you on the web first. They want to see who you are, on the web before they make contact with you. So feel free to visit us on the web, www echelon office, Echelon, the word office.com, or you can call directly in. Our number is 888-892-9882. Or if you're so inclined, feel free to email me directly. My email address is mwade at echelon wealth, Echelon, the word wealth.com.
All right, fantastic. Well, Mark, look, I appreciate you carving some time out of your busy day to be with us and dive into this idea of asset protection. And you've got some clients to take care of, so we'll let you get back to doing that. But I appreciate your time and looking forward to the next one.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Looking forward to next time.
Alrighty, fantastic. And hey, look, before we go, we want to say one final thank you to our audience. We appreciate you guys for being with us, being a part of the conversation today. If you took anything away from this discussion on asset protection and maybe you're recognizing the need for that wall around your wealth, well, do us a favor. Subscribe to the show on whichever platform you checked us out on. And then, of course, share any of this information with friends, family, business owners, anybody that you think would benefit from these types of conversations because they're meant for you. We're taking the strategies, solutions, we're bringing them right to you here on this show. And boy, do we have some good topics queued up for some future episodes that we would hate to have you guys miss out on. So be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on any future conversation surrounding a given wealth management topic between Mark and myself. So for Mark, I'm Ryan. We're going to go ahead and say so long, but we appreciate you guys once more for joining us here on today's installment of Optimizing Your Financial World.